Welcome to Take It Off, the podcast where we ditch the heavy layers and get real about who we truly are beneath it all. I'm Julie, and together with my co-host and friend Jess, we'll share our own stories and explore the triumphs and tribulations of being a woman in today's world. Let's get real, have some laughs, and inspire each other to embrace our true selves. Welcome to Take It Off. Welcome to our first episode of the Take It Off podcast.
Hey.
So excited to be here with you today. Should we start with some introductions?
I think that's a good idea. I think that we should, I'm going to put you on the spot, sort of.
Okay.
I think that we should I think you should introduce me and I should introduce you.
Okay.
Okay?
All right. Since you're putting me on the spot, do you get to go first or do I get to go first?
Good question. I'll go first.
Okay.
So, I want to back up. I'm Jess. This is Julie.
Yes.
I'm going to introduce Julie. And we have known each other I was thinking about it this morning. I think it's been 12 years. Mm-hmm. We met in the junior league where you had just moved home from Buffalo and you had a baby, right?
Yes.
And I had just moved home from DC. We were both, I think, starting our quest to make friends in the area and change the world. So I think that's where it all started. And then, from there, over the past 12 years, we've both consecutively led the VP of Community Development, I think it was, arm of the Junior League. We have raised daughters who were born 2 months apart. They're now coming up on 10. Mm-hmm. We co-led a Girl Scout troop starting, in the middle of a pandemic and for 4 years. And so these are the things that I would say I know to be true about you. So Julie is one of the most driven people I know and somebody who comes up with an idea and actually brings it to fruition. You're one of the only people I know that says, let's do this. And then we do it and it's great. I would call you a dreamer, but I would say that you're one of the most grounded dreamers I've ever met, right? You're a dreamer, but you're practical about it, which mm-hmm. I think is just a very cool quality. So you're a friend who has spent decades in an industry that was so dominated by men, but you refuse to let that stifle your growth or change you. Instead, you took that as an opportunity to grow, but also build the women up around you. You had the opportunity to start an insurance department under, an insurance division under a large financial institution. And when you did that successfully, you weren't afraid to just tear it all down and start over because, at the end of the day, you're here to pursue a passion of lifting other women up around you. And the best way for you to do it was the hardest way, which was just completely starting over. So I think that you should add to that whatever you want. But that's how I see you, just as one of the most driven and grounded people I know who just reaches for the stars time and time again.
Wow, thank you. Oh, that was so sweet. I love that. And grounded dreamer. Mm-hmm. I am going to hold on to that because I really mm-hmm. like that.
It's you. Everybody needs a Julie in their lives.
Oh, you're sweet. Well, I don't know that I have anything to add to that. All right, so now I get to introduce you to Jess. And I would say a lot of the same things about how we met. You're mm-hmm. right. It was a dozen years ago. I can still picture we were in a bowling mm-hmm. alley.
We were. Yep.
For a social event for the junior league. Mm-hmm. And I just remember, like you said, wanting to make friends and change the world. Making friends as an adult and changing the world. I'm not sure which is harder. But when I met you, I was just amazed by how much we had in common. And a lot of it was geography, right? So I walk up to this random person and I introduce myself and I find out that you went to Pitt, which is where I went. You lived in DC, which is where I had lived before I moved to Buffalo. And now you were living in the same town as me. And I thought, I have to be friends with this girl. And that's where it started. And what I would say about Jess is that you are endlessly curious about yourself, about the world and your place in it. And I love that about you. I would say you're creative. So you take that curiosity and build a business or use it to be creative in your real estate business. And the last thing I would say is what you said about me, which is I really feel like you're driven. So it's not just I'm curious and I'm creative. It's what can I do when I see a problem that needs fixing, and how can I bring my own uniqueness to that. So, and I love that about you. The other thing I would share is that, like you already mentioned, you always say yes to my big crazy ideas. So whether it's, leading the community efforts of a small nonprofit when we both had newborns at home, or starting a Girl Scout troop in the middle of a pandemic, I know that if I've got a crazy idea, usually a good idea, I can come to Jess and she'll say yes to it.
Speaking of big ideas, do you remember where we were the first time we had this idea to start the podcast?
We were at a women's conference that I had started at my previous employer, and listening to two amazing trailblazers in our community who had started a podcast. Two friends just like us who had started a podcast. And I remember, I think I might have texted you while we were sitting in the workshop that they were leading and said, 2024 is the year of our podcast. And we've got a few months left in 2024, and so we just made it. But like you said, here we are bringing it to life.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think that earlier in 2024, we would have said that this, we would have gotten this off the ground a little bit sooner, but life has just been, it's been a little bit different for both of us lately. It's been, lots of change for both of us.
Yes. There definitely has been a lot of change for both of us, especially over the past few months, I would say. How did we get here?
How did we get here? I think that it has just been, for both of us, I'll speak to myself, my own perspective. I think that we do have a lot of parallels, though. For me, I think I just found myself living this life that just didn't feel aligned with who I was at all. And I think, maybe it is around this time of life, like 40-ish, where we're like, looking at what we've done so far and the impact we've made on the world and what do we want to do, and, does it line up? And for me, I don't think that it did. I think there was a point in my life where I was on track, I think, to really live in line with who I was like meant to be at that time, right? It's, I think back to post-college in my early career, I had just finished a semester at CU where I was exploring the world, and I was working in PR in Washington, D.C. And, I was really happy. The things that I know about myself is I'm kind of a wanderer. I'm a lifelong student, and I love helping other people express themselves and tell their stories. And so, being in public relations, I had moved to DC. I was really I was moving in a direction that really would have, I think, been more in line with who I was. But, life happened and I moved home, and I knew I couldn't work for anyone anymore. So I started in real estate. And from that point on, I think it was just this gradual unwinding of identity for me. I think I found out a decade after being in real estate that I never really identified as a real estate agent. I love meeting new people and helping them transition from one chapter of life to another, but it doesn't always end up like that. That's not always the journey that you take. And so I just kept adding layers of, I was seeking fulfillment, and I just kept adding layers and layers and layers. So what I was really doing was just kind of masking my lack of fulfillment by, trying on different things that just didn't stick. So I started a business, an indoor play space for kids while I was working in real estate full time, right? I became a Girl Scout leader, and I loved all of these things, but there was just this like deeper need to help people that I don't think I was really getting. And I think on top of that, before, I'm not going to go too deep into this one, but I think on top of that, motherhood is a really big part of that journey, where you change. Like, the time in my life that I spoke about earlier, I was not yet married. I had met my to-be husband, but I was still just sort of living out my dreams. And I think most of us, when we are moving into the role of motherhood or of mother, if that's, the path we choose to take, it's really hard to, do all of the things that we want to do, but maybe we're also expected to do. And I think that the thing that suffers often the most is the expression of our truest selves. I think a lot of us lose that along the way, and I know that I definitely did. So, in a nutshell, I think I just found myself working in multiple fields that I just, I really didn't relate to. Mm-hmm. What about you? What brought you to this massive shift?
Yeah. Well, I love what you said about trying different things on. And I agree. My shift definitely came last year when I turned 40. And I think, a milestone birthday makes you reflect on what you've accomplished and what you want to achieve in the next decade. And I too had tried a lot of things on. Mm-hmm. For me, if I'm being honest, I'm going to go way back. Mm-hmm. I've always been, if you've read Michelle Obama's book, a box checker, her first book. Mm-hmm. So I went to middle school, I got good grades, check. I went to high school, I was president of the Honor Society, check. I went to college. There was no other choice in my worldview at that point, check. I found my husband in college, got married, check. I got the job at the big corporation and I was climbing the corporate ladder, check. And then I started a family, like you. And I think it was probably 7 or 8 years ago when I just started having these thoughts in my brain. And we talk about this a lot. I have a nonstop track in my brain that runs all the time. I'm sure I'm not alone in that. And she just started to ask me, is this all there is? What's next? And I think for many of us who've grown up in traditional families, suburban communities, you live your life in these 4-year increments, right? So middle school's 4 years, high school's 4 years, college is 4 years. Then you get into your first real job, quote unquote. And at the end of 4 years, you kind of look around and say, well, now what? Mm-hmm. And 7 or 8 years ago, I had been in the corporate world for a decade. And the only way I can describe it is like the wild, wild west, because you've just now got this length of time ahead of you that's not 4 years, not a decade, but decades. And I just started to ask myself, is this all? Like, what impact am I having in the world? And like you mentioned, I still work in a very male-dominated environment. And I just had this restlessness that was building up inside of me to do more. And like you, I tried different things on. So I started a conference for women. I started a networking group, became a Girl Scout troop leader to impact the next generation. But it just never was enough. And that's when I decided just a few short months ago to go out on my own and start my own business. Let me back up a little bit. Probably a year and a half ago, when that voice in my head was getting louder, I really started to work on myself. What are my core values? What's my mission for life? What's my vision? And I'm still working on that. And maybe we'll talk about that more in a future episode. But I feel pretty strong about the values that I have established. And, whether I decide to stay as an entrepreneur for the rest of my career, or maybe join another organization or partner with somebody else, I'm not looking for validation in that role. I'm looking for alignment. And that's what I want to hold true to going forward.
I love that. I've loved watching your journey unfold. I think, I've starting when that sort of like spark, was lit deep inside you. I think I've been able to sort of recognize that and watch it grow, and it's been really exciting. I remember when we sat down and you said, "Okay, I'm doing it. I'm gonna like go out on my own." And yeah, I was just, and I still am so excited for you to see, what you're able to do when you just have your own, like you can just totally blaze your own path. And yeah, it's going to be fun to watch. It's going to be fun for all of us to watch.
Yeah. Well, thank you for stoking that fire, because we all need that in our lives, the encouragement, the support, the accountability. So I appreciate that.
Anytime.
So for me, I think it was turning 40. It was this restlessness that I just couldn't contain anymore in my current role that made me realize it was time to make a change. I won't overshare, but I was struggling with anxiety as well, which I think a lot of professional women and moms and just society in general right now is struggling with. And so for me, I wanted to be proactive and make a change before I got to a breaking point. What was it for you that made you realize I've got to do something about this? I can't just keep thinking about it.
I'm laughing because I feel like you teed that up for me perfectly, because I really did. I ignored all of that. I think I felt like I was sort of stuck in, I don't want to just say like the commitments I had made. I'm someone that like what you see is what you get. And when I start something, I finish it, and I don't just like, change it like super like easily or casually. And I did get to a breaking point. I did get to that point where I physically couldn't do anymore. I ignored, I think, the signs for years. And like you said, I was struggling with anxiety. And I think a lot of that started in the pandemic, opening the bricks and mortar business that I did. I also had my third pregnancy was very difficult. I ended up hospitalized at the end, and, I had a NICU baby and some postpartum anxiety, but I really never slowed down or took the time to care for myself. I just let the stress and the, commitments pile up. And I did, my breaking point, and we can, well, I'm sure we'll dive into this more in, another episode, but, I ended up just having a very, debilitating flare up, and I physically couldn't work anymore. And I took that as an opportunity to really just sit in where I was and who I was. And, you mentioned taking the time to really learn and know yourself. And I think for so many of us, when we get to this point, we sort of just like follow life's path. We just check the boxes and keep moving forward. I think we lose track of that like journey of self-discovery that should be part of what we're doing like throughout our lives. That should always be something that we're committed to, because we're always changing. And I had ignored that, part of myself for a long time. And so the change really started when I really started looking closely at, who I am, what do I want to do with the rest of my life, and how can I, change where I'm at. And I really sat in that for a while, and this is where I am. It's been a slow evolution, but fast in some ways too, I guess.
Yeah. I don't know who said it, but I've heard this phrase before, that you have to slow down to speed up.
Yeah.
And I feel like the pandemic gave a lot of us time to slow down. But I feel like coming out of the pandemic, we went from 0 to 100.
Do you remember? So during the pandemic, I'm going to side note quickly.
Yeah.
At the very beginning, you and I used to meet to walk.
Yes.
And we felt like we were really like, naughty for a meeting. And we would walk on opposite sides of the path, and we would talk. And the theme that kept coming up was like the keep list, I think, right? Like what are the, it was so hard to like settle into that time where we were moving so fast and then everything stopped. And we would regularly talk about like, what do we keep? Like, where are the silver linings? And I don't know, what do you think? Do you think many of those things stuck?
Well, I'm so glad that you brought that up because you're right. We created this keep list and I remember talking about it. And I think it would be fun. I don't have it at my fingertips, but I know I can find it and we should bring that out and talk about that next episode.
Okay, yeah, definitely.
But I know what that keep list was about. It was about slowing down and being present. One thing I can think of is just like taking a bike ride with my kids. Or going on a walk on a beautiful day with a friend and taking that time for myself and for us. But we should pull the keep list back out.
Yeah. Definitely.
But so we've come out of the pandemic, way out of the pandemic. And I feel like, we're going at 100 miles an hour and it is important for us to stop and take time to reflect. And that's how change happens. So it's unfortunate that you had that breakdown, right? But how are you now making intentional space to make sure that doesn't happen again and to help you plan what you want, this next year or two or even beyond to look like?
So that's a really good question. I would say I'm really rebuilding from the ground up. So I'm building my business in a way that I know supports what I need out of life and what I have to offer into the world, how I can help people. But I'm also kind of like going back to the roots that I think that I had maybe like hidden for so long. I think that, as I move further and further away from like who I really was, I think that the tools that I'm using now as part of this journey are the tools that I sort of had like, I don't know, I guess, just hidden. I've always loved astrology and I, on this journey recently, I guess I've really become a student of astrology. I mean, technically a student. I'm in school to become an astrologer, but I'm using those tools to really figure out who I am at my core, why I interact in the world the way that I do. In addition to astrology, I'm, proactively using tools like journaling and meditation to make space for, whatever it is that I really want to do to kind of come to light. I found over time that the more space that I make, the more that my journey just really presents itself. Like it's already within me. I just have to listen and make the space to really recognize where I'm supposed to go from here. So I would say it's a combination of, it happening intuitively, but also, I'm doing a lot of like the activities like journaling and meditation to kind of bring it out a little bit more. That's, I guess, more the woo side of me. That's like, I don't really have a plan.
No, you do have a plan and you're going to help me because I am intrigued. I'm curious about the astrology and, the energy and chakras and all of that. And so I hope that as we continue on this path that you'll teach me some of that because growth is one of my core values. And so I always want to be expanding and learning. And so you're going to teach me all about what my Taurus tells the world about me.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait to read your natal chart. We're going to do that on here sometime, right?
Okay, I love it.
We're doing it.
And for me, so how am I going about this change? Same thing, like trying to make space. I would be lying to you, and I don't want to lie to you or anybody who chooses to listen to this podcast if I said, I'm getting up in the morning and I'm journaling and I'm thinking about my purpose. Really what I'm doing is getting up in the morning and looking at my phone. But I'm working on that. I'm a work in progress, right? But I am trying to find those quiet times for me, meditation is not a 20-minute or a 30-minute experience. It might just be 5 minutes where I can close my eyes and think. Or meditative walking when I walk my dog, that's my best thinking next to the shower, probably. And so, again, just trying to be intentional. I love that word intentional about what I want this next chapter to look like. And again, always coming back to my values as I do that. It's not perfect. It's really messy. And I had a great coach tell me, like, it's okay to just sit in the messy middle for a little bit. So I feel like that's where I am, and I'm trying to get comfortable, but not too comfortable, sitting in the messy middle.
It's a hard thing to do, especially for people like us who like to, kind of check boxes. That messy middle part is really uncomfortable.
So I'm just trying to sit in it for a while before sit in it and find clarity about what I want the next chapter to look like.
That's interesting because I think that that's definitely an overlapping theme that I would have never anticipated as part of the process is the sitting in it is like there's, throughout this last like year and a half as I've been sort of like building this business and going through this change, there's a lot of times where I do feel like I almost just have to like sit in it, let myself do the changing sort of like on my own, let those like layers of my past life sort of like fall away. It's a lot of like just I think natural change that has to happen. You can't force it. You have to just sort of let yourself be so that you can kind of figure out where you're going next. You can't like you can't just like plow through the process.
No. And you have to pay attention. So when I've been trying to be very cognizant of when I'm doing something that lights me up, that I pay attention and I figure out what is it that I'm doing that is lighting me up right now. And that I am good at journaling. I'll write that down or I'll put it in my phone. And eventually, if you do that enough, at least I'm hoping, I'll see a thread, right? But yeah, you just have to sit in it and pay attention.
Yeah, I love that. I really haven't thought about that much. Like, I mean, I know when I'm doing something that lights me up, I want to do more of it. But that would be an interesting thing to track too. Just what's been lighting you up lately? I would love to hear that. Just they're like little inspiration seeds that like you can, if you don't pay attention, they just off they go.
Yes.
They just float away in the wind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll give you one example.
Okay.
Last week I was co-leading a webinar on a book with a group of women. And if you know me, which you do, I just touched on a few things that I know to be true about myself. Growth is a core value. I don't have enough time in a day to read all the books that I want to read. And lifting up women is really important to me. And that was a moment that I had to stop and pay attention and say, this is lighting me up. This feels really good. This is a strength of mine. So often I think we focus on our weaknesses, but this is a strength of mine. How do I make it even stronger and use this going forward? So that's something that's lighting me up.
So in the moment, like how do you like remember that? How do you journal about that? Like what do you do to keep track of that?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny. Like I almost feel like, has this ever happened to you? I'm having the webinar or I'm leading the webinar and it's almost like I've like, and you might appreciate this. I've left my body and I'm watching this happen and I'm thinking, this is a moment, right? This is something that I'm loving. This is something that I need to remember. And so it's almost like taking a mental picture of it. Because when you asked me what lit me up, we're sitting in my office at home and I'm looking over at the chair that I was sitting in when I was leading that webinar. And so it's like this mental picture that I took of myself. And that's how I can remember it.
Yeah, I love that. I love that visual of you like leaving your body and just like watching over it. But it's like a really strong picture that I would imagine would like stick in your mind. And I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to add to, so you talked about astrology and sitting in the uncomfortable, sometimes the messy middle, as I called it. I just mentioned, something that is a strength of mine. And I feel like as women, we're not always comfortable pointing out our strengths.
Mm-hmm.
But as we continue on this path, that's something that I want us to work on. So you'll teach me astrology.
Yeah.
I'm going to pull out the disc or the strength finder, or I know Working Genius is one that we both share a love for. But I just am excited to share all the things that we've tried, and hopefully others will share with us. And we can just, help other people, because I can't think that we're the only two people in the world feeling like this right now.
Yeah, I think also just like being this age, we've talked about this a few different times, and actually, the other afternoon, as we gathered with a group of friends at your house, a group of other women, there were several women who brought up, this life phase that they're in right now, and really like searching for identity and the path forward. So yeah, I mean, I look forward to kind of exploring our own journeys together as we continue on them. But yeah, I really want to hear, from other people and talk to other people and just hear where they are along the way too. I think that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so before we wrap up for the day, I want to rewind a little bit. We named the podcast Take It Off. And I'm sure inquiring minds would love to know why we named it that. So
yes,
what's your perspective on that?
Take it off. It's surprising. It's a little risque. It's a little out of my comfort zone.
Mine too, yeah.
And that's what this chapter is all about. It's embracing new ideas, trying new things, and taking off all the labels, all the titles, all the names that we've just been piling up probably since adolescence. And taking it all off so that we can find, for me, the Julie, 9-year-old Julie. And what did she want? What did she want her future to look like? Who was she before, the world started telling her who she should be? And I had to take a lot of stuff off to get back to that. And for example, I'll give you an example. At some point, probably around 9, I got the label of being shy. And that has stuck with me ever since. And when I think about that label has kept me from, in some instances, using my voice, sharing my opinion, contributing where I might have had something of value to add. I think about all the missed opportunities or things that didn't happen because I was Julie and I was shy. And as I've been thinking about my values and who I am as a person over the past, 12 to 18 months, it's not that I'm shy. It's that I'm thoughtful. And I love that you shared that when you introduced me, that I am a dreamer, but I'm a grounded dreamer. And it's not because I'm shy, it's because I'm thoughtful. And so Take It Off seemed appropriate for this podcast about shedding all of the layers, all of, like I said, the titles, the names, and just getting back to who we are as we enter what I think is a really exciting time of life.
It's funny. I would have never called you shy, ever. There have been times where like introverted Jess goes along to networking events with you, and I'm like, oh, good, I'm with Julie. She'll help me meet people, or she'll help me feel comfortable. But yeah, I would have never pegged you as shy.
Well, thank you. That tells me that I'm improving, or I'm already taking that off.
Yes, you have taken it off.
So in the theme of Take It Off, let's end every episode with one thing that we're going to take off this week. And I'll go first. What I'm taking off this week is the worry about the future. And what I mean by that is I have a really full week ahead of me, but it's full of things that, like we were talking about earlier, that fill me up. I get to teach this week. I get to travel. I get to be with some incredible women in person, which doesn't happen as often as I would like. And I'm going to enjoy that because these are things that I've worked really hard to bring together and now they're happening. And so I just want to enjoy them and not worry about what's going to happen next week or the week after. I'm going to sit in what I've built for this week and enjoy it.
Good for you. I love that. It's like this is what it's all about. And you don't have to worry about what you're going to do next because you have built this incredible week, and this is really what the journey is about.
Right. What are you taking off?
So, okay, I'm taking off the feeling that I need perfection in my business. I think that I've spent all of this time really building the structure of what I want to share with the world. And now it's like a matter of just transitioning that to starting to share it. And we both recently read this book, Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. And she has this idea that when you share your creativity with the world, you do it for you, not for the other person. And I think that the idea of taking off the perfectionism is rooted in that for me, where, I'm ready to just sort of start talking about sharing my business more, but doing it for me because I know that helps me on my own journey. It lights me up. And I know that, the insights and the expertise that I have to share with the world will naturally, kind of fall in line. Mm-hmm. So the story doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to tell it.
Ooh, I love that. Mic drop. I love, done is better than perfect. And as an example, we hit the record button on this podcast today and we did it. And what are we going to talk about next time?
Oh, man. I feel like we have a lot of ideas, but we did make promises about the keep list.
Yes, we're going to bring the keep list back.
Okay.
I'm going to tell you how I didn't worry this week about the future.
Okay. All right. And I'll share my story of dropping perfection. So,
yes.
Yeah, with other things, because we have a lot of really interesting things to say.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, on that note, I'll see you next time.
Take it off.
Take it off.